Alright, so listen. Just when it appeared like Blake Lively's professional life couldn't get any more complicated, her attorney had delivered us all a fresh talking point. And combined with the judge's latest remarks, it's raising serious questions about whether her career can fully recover from this controversy now.
Do now for the women who were looking forward to her to be the voice? Is that no longer the goal? Like, would she be fine with just saying, I got my money back, and the rest of you that were looking for me to be like, Queen Mother, I'm no longer that? Is she looking to support women causes moving forward? Is that going to, because we've seen her since she's been out in the street, since she got her release papers. She's been at the Fendi show. She's been at the Met. Are we going to see her go to some, is this an idea? Maybe go to some shelters, support some.
Now, in case you don't know, a journalist just stepped right up to Blake Lively with this question. That was pretty interesting. I mean, she basically asked what made Blake suddenly decide to settle privately instead of finally getting her day in court like she'd been promising for so long. Was it because she needed to be free to attend the Met Gala event this year too?
She needs to be at the Met Gala that badly? Or what was it that went from we're going to court, we're going to hear from her, to actually a settlement does the.
Remember how just hours after dropping her serious allegations, Blake was back in red carpet mode, posing for cameras as if the entire lawsuit was nothing more than a terrible nightmare.
Archival Versace, but they metified it by adding a big, beautiful.
Anyway, the reporter named Elsie, whom I mentioned earlier, questioned Blake Lively's attorney about whether the purpose of this entire lawsuit was truly about defending women like they said, or whether it was actually a battle for money and legal fees under California's Section 47.1 law. This question went straight toward the heart of the entire controversy. When faced with that kind of pressure, where someone asks whether this is about fairness or finances, Blake Lively's lawyer seemed unable to provide a clear response. Instead, she nervously shifted back into explaining how valuable the California law was. Then she quickly walked away, avoiding any further questions. That moment, recorded right there on camera, revealed a lot about the situation. It suggested that this was no longer simply about seeking justice, but rather a complicated battle where legal teams were struggling to defend their position. To understand why this became such a major issue, you need to know what California Civil Code Section 47.1 actually represents. The law was created to help protect people facing defamation claims and give support to those who may lack the resources to defend themselves against powerful individuals attempting to silence them. That is the original purpose behind the protection. However, critics argue that Blake Lively, as a highly successful actress, was attempting to use a safeguard intended for vulnerable individuals to support expensive legal battles. They believe that is far removed from the true meaning of justice and represents a questionable use of the system. What makes the situation even more surprising is that only days before the trial was expected to begin, both sides reached a private settlement where Blake Lively reportedly walked away without major victories while abandoning her main claims and avoiding a courtroom appearance. Her Met Gala appearance became a major talking point for critics who questioned her choices. She stepped away from the legal fight and quickly returned to public events and cameras as if the controversy had disappeared. Even Taylor Swift became connected to the dispute after Justin Baldoni's legal team sought communications between them, leaving Blake without the same public support she once had. She was attempting to rebuild her public image, but many viewers felt they understood the strategy behind it. They believed the lawsuit was less about justice and more about maintaining control over her reputation. And this is where the story becomes even more complicated because when you compare Blake Lively's public statements with the details appearing in court filings, it feels like two entirely different realities. The contrast between both versions continues to fuel ongoing public debate.
I had a feeling like, oh no, my bill is becoming the Met Gala, the Fendi event, and now 47.1. This is part of a PR campaign, and I felt
the entire thing was about how Blake was battling this historic fight for women's rights and workplace safety. But the court records, they reveal she was attempting to use a state law that was created for a completely different circumstance in a jurisdiction where it did not even apply, and the whole case was dismissed very quickly. Her team continued claiming they had all this evidence prepared to present before a jury, but the truth was they were seeking an out-of-court settlement because they knew they could not actually handle cross-examination. The official explanation of the settlement focused on how this was a major victory against harmful practices and influential industry figures. But the real result, she surrendered her right to appeal, abandoned her Title VII retaliation claims, and withdrew in total defeat. Her attorneys were publicly discussing pursuing justice for emotional and reputation damage. But her side was desperately attempting to collect attorney fees through this wrongly applied state code to cover the enormous legal expenses they had accumulated through their own strategic mistakes. And this is where the original creator of the law enters and completely dismantles everything she was attempting to do at last.
You remember, even when I met Blake, I did tell her that multiple friends of mine told me, great hesitation, don't meet her. Like, I had one friend who left me a 7-minute voicemail saying,
Victoria Burke isn't just some random woman who created a law inside an academic bubble. She drafted this law after personally surviving a traumatic incident. She has spent more than a year researching and developing this law specifically to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. This woman understands the pain of the justice system failing victims. And then along comes Blake Lively's lawyers. And what do? Well, they had the audacity to contact Victoria Burke through group email, casually announcing that Blake was taking the 47.1 law nationwide like it was some kind of promotional campaign for a product.
not consulted. I was just told she's going to move my bill nationwide.
I mean, this situation really reveals how arrogant these attorneys were. They intentionally excluded Victoria from all later planning conversations and revisions. They didn't want the individual who actually created the law anywhere close to their strategy. They wanted to take her work and reshape it into something it was never intended to be.
Told that the paragraph has something to do with protecting attorneys if they would be sued.
The attorneys actually tried to secretly rewrite the legislation behind her back. They wanted to add broad lawyer protections that Victoria had opposed because she understood what they were doing. They were attempting to turn her victim-focused bill into a legal enrichment scheme. But then came the absolute turning point. When Victoria appeared on the Megyn Kelly show with a voice literally shaking with controlled anger, she completely destroyed Blake Lively's strategy. She revealed that she did not want the judge to award attorney fees to Blake. That's it. The creator of the law publicly rejecting how her work was being used too.
Unhappy with it being weaponized as a PR redemption tool by Blake Lively and her team. Honestly, I don't think the judge should grant attorneys fees in this matter.
That statement reveals everything about how complicated this situation had become. But let me explain the actual sequence of failures that Blake Lively's attorneys created, because this is where you notice a pattern that brought their client more problems than solutions. These were not simple mistakes. These were major breakdowns that showed a strategy built on overconfidence instead of careful legal planning. The first serious issue happened when her team depended on California Civil Code 51.9 for a production that was actually filmed in New Jersey. This is basic legal knowledge. You cannot use one state's rules for an event that occurred in a different state. The judge dismissed this argument because California law does not have authority beyond its borders. This was a major jurisdiction mistake, and it gave the opposing side access to Blake Lively's private information because discovery required disclosures before they even solved this obvious issue. Then the attorneys badly handled the contract dispute claim. The judge pointed out multiple contradictions, and here is the problem. Blake Lively herself had missed numerous days and exited production early. So while they claimed Wayfarer violated agreements, they opened the door to arguments that their own client had violated her contract first. If you're Team Lively, this type of response has to concern you, right? The financial consequences from these legal mistakes were also significant. Grocery company Kroger, one of the largest partners, reportedly expressed concerns about the negative publicity. Other important business partners also wanted the criticism reduced because they did not want their names connected to the controversy. When you review the list of major attorney errors, a pattern becomes obvious. Filing in the incorrect jurisdiction caused dismissal and revealed weak preparation. Allowing discovery before solving jurisdiction exposed private messages. Claiming contract violations highlighted Blake Lively's own possible violations. Contacting Victoria Burke damaged their relationship with the law's creator. And releasing Taylor Swift communications weakened her Hollywood support system. Every mistake added more damage until the entire situation became chaotic. And this is where everything gets even more complicated. Behind the Met Gala appearances and public statements, the situation inside her team was reportedly filled with stress and conflict. She was seeing that the costly legal guidance had created serious consequences for her reputation. The attorneys had struggled with nearly every major decision. They filed arguments in improper jurisdictions, failed to adjust complaints when Wayfair Studios challenged them, allowed Discovery to expose controversial moments from production, and pushed away Victoria Burke, who could have been a crucial supporter in the battle for public perception. The result was a situation where every attempted move created another challenge and left Blake's team fighting to repair the damage caused by their own legal decisions.
Lively, this kind of pushback has to work.
When the realization arrived that the upcoming trial would physically require Blake onto the witness stand, removing her PR protection and exposing her to cross-examination under oath, she panicked. I mean, it was obvious she could not face answering for the leaked panic emails, corporate backlash, and jurisdictional problems. Internal sources also suggested a collapse in the attorney-client relationship, with Blake considering the possibility of suing her own lawyers for misconduct. She was basically arguing that their weak preparation and lack of understanding had permanently harmed her brand. She wanted compensation from the people who had promised her success. But here's the thing, the lawyers had the advantage. They made it clear that if she forced the case into trial or attempted to sue, people would reveal the most damaging secret of all, that the original allegations were overstated. I mean, she was basically stuck and couldn't defeat her attorneys, and she couldn't enter trial without exposing the actual reality. The only option was the private settlement she eventually accepted, leaving with nothing except a damaged reputation and enormous debt. Now, the judge has effectively ended the entire effort. Even after the primary lawsuit was resolved and everyone had agreed to confidentiality, this desperate effort to recover attorney fees under Section 47.1 was still sitting there on the docket, like the final fading hope of her lawyers attempting to handle their huge expenses. Blake was refusing to pay them, so they were holding on to this one remaining chance of receiving something through the court system. However, they had misjudged how careful and direct Judge actually is. On May 28, 2026, Judge filed a fresh order, and it was extremely severe. He arranged a very fast mandatory in-person hearing for June 1st, only days later, and gave both sides a schedule where they had limited time to provide letter briefs before oral arguments. This was not ordinary legal procedure. This was a judge demanding explanations with judicial authority. He was not entertaining delays, and he was not allowing polished PR statements. He wanted the facts, and he wanted them immediately. The court expected complete honesty from everyone involved because the situation had already created significant questions about strategy choices and legal decisions overall.
Said, "Oh, Blake Lively, Amber Heard," when I mentioned her name. I'm like, so it had been decided that we were not associating celebrities going forward. We wanted to work with ordinary survivors.
Blake Lively's entire professional world has basically fallen apart, and I'm not talking about some small obstacle or a controversy that can be fixed with a polished PR statement and a little brand recovery time. I'm talking about a complete multi-front collapse of everything she created through decades of effort. And the most painful part is that many critics believe this happened through her own decisions and the choices made by those surrounding her. Let me explain what's unfolding because I think many people still believe this is simply a temporary media cycle that will eventually disappear. It isn't. Public perception has already shifted. The numbers are speaking loudly, and her career from a business standpoint appears to be facing serious challenges. So, first, let's discuss the lifestyle brand that turned into major opportunities. Her hair care company, Blake Brown, launched in 2024 through a major exclusive retail partnership with Target, and early expectations were incredibly high. They wanted this to grow into a multi-hundred-million-dollar business. But this is where the situation became troubling, especially financially. Target was already experiencing its own corporate challenges during this period, facing criticism surrounding DI programs and Pride merchandise that resulted in shareholder concerns and consumer backlash. So, Target was already dealing with pressure, and then her controversy reached its highest point exactly when the brand needed strong performance. Reports claimed Blake Brown experienced retail sales weakness between 56% and 78%. To understand that better, the brand, which some insiders initially valued at an optimistic $100 million, reportedly saw projected 2025 sales fall below $15 million. That's not a small setback. That's a major collapse. And it wasn't only the hair product business. Her beverage companies followed a similar pattern. Betty Buzz, the non-alcoholic mixer brand, officially closed and stopped operations in May 2025. The ending of Betty Buzz left the alcoholic companion brand, Betty Booze, carrying the remaining costs and market expectations. But some retail partners like Kroger reportedly showed hesitation about promoting the products, referencing negative consumer reactions and wanting distance from the surrounding legal controversy. Hollywood studios judge an actor's value not only by talent, but also by what they call the halo effect of brand strength. If large retailers cannot successfully sell products connected to an actor's name because of widespread public criticism, studios may become hesitant to spend $100 million production budgets on projects that rely on that same name to attract global audiences. The calculation is simple. If you cannot sell products, you cannot guarantee movie ticket sales. Now, let's discuss the Taylor Swift factor because this damaged her image in ways that went beyond regular publicity problems. Her industry support system was heavily connected to her long friendship with one of the biggest music stars in the world. When controversy affects someone inside a famous circle, the shared popularity of that group can sometimes provide protection against complete rejection. Blake Lively no longer appears to have the same level of public support from that connection, leaving her facing the consequences of professional decisions. But things became more complicated because as those natural support networks weakened, her team allegedly attempted to use industry influence to pressure individual creators. Directors, producers, and crew members may now view collaboration as complicated. Major studios generally avoid bringing unnecessary controversy into productions. And then there is the theatrical release pipeline, which could be the most revealing sign of all. If this controversy was truly just a temporary news cycle that would eventually fade away, major studios would continue moving ahead with upcoming theatrical projects without hesitation. They would promote the films, protect the investments, and continue building around her name. But the uncertainty surrounding future projects suggests a different reality. The industry watches public reaction carefully, and every partnership, endorsement, and production decision now carries extra scrutiny because reputation remains one of Hollywood's most valuable assets in modern entertainment landscape. To benefit from continued attention. Instead, Blake Lively's upcoming projects show stalled development, permanently delayed scripts, and weaker distribution plans. The biggest example is the highly anticipated sequel to A Simple Favor. The original 2018 movie became a major success, and the follow-up had already been completed before these controversies became public. It was expected to receive a worldwide theatrical launch. But because of the damage to her reputation, Amazon MGM Studios skipped a cinema release strategy, and the movie was quietly moved onto a streaming service. The strongest evidence that her career has suffered comes from the exact financial figures presented to the court under oath by her own side. Blake Lively reportedly requested $161 million in damages. She also acknowledged that her future income opportunities and brand value had been seriously affected. A major Hollywood star does not normally sue a former co-star for $56 million in projected future acting losses. A successful actor simply secures another major role and continues forward. The choice to seek these damages through legal action suggests that her team believed traditional Hollywood opportunities had become much harder to access. By attempting to recover these amounts through the disputed use of Section 47.1, her attorneys revealed that the lawsuit had become the only possible path toward financial recovery. Asking for $161 million was not proof of victory. It was an indication that her career options had become limited and that she was seeking compensation that studios might no longer willingly provide. During the proceedings, Justin Baldoni's attorney made a strong argument when she stated that Blake Lively's request for fees was essentially an attempt to bypass the jury process she had already avoided by settling.
Think about that.
Blake had given up her right to a jury trial through the settlement agreement, and now her lawyers were asking the judge to perform a similar role and award financial compensation. Justin's attorney described it as an obvious effort to receive the rewards of winning without completing the difficult process of proving the claims. And Judge's firm response throughout this matter also placed Blake Lively's team in an impossible position. There was almost no remaining path forward. The impact of the judge's decision extended beyond the courtroom and reached Hollywood executives and corporate partners watching closely. His rejection of this strategy exposed something that could no longer remain hidden, that Blake's public reputation had suffered significant damage. Her image as a dependable, profitable star, someone who could lead a major production and generate revenue for studios, had been seriously weakened. When a judge challenges the foundation of your legal arguments, when the person behind the law questions how you attempted to use it, and when your own legal team faces criticism over their approach, that represents more than a simple defeat. It becomes a major turning point that can permanently change the direction of a professional career.
Lyman is seeing between the lines that Lively or the Lively parties are trying to get a one-sided evidentiary hearing without any real due process.
When Blake Lively's attorney avoided that question about the Met Gala and began stumbling over statements about groundbreaking laws to conceal the reality that she was actually fighting for her own payment, she confirmed every suspicion that the public and the court had developed about the completely empty and unsupported nature of this entire operation. That moment spread widely for a reason. Everyone watching could recognize the desperation, avoidance, and total absence of a real response. But here's the thing that truly changes the perspective. Blake Lively's career did not collapse because of one unsuccessful film or a small controversy that could be repaired with a simple PR strategy. It ended through the unforgiving records of a federal court case that exposed mistakes, difficult discovery demands, contract disputes, and obvious attempts to use the legal system for personal advantage in Hollywood. It ended when her lawyer contacted a law professor and attempted to use her work for publicity purposes. It ended when she considered taking action against the same attorneys who helped create additional complications while seeking millions of dollars. It ended when a judge dismissed the claims while the actual creator of the law publicly requested that fees be denied. And think about those supporters outside the courthouse. Eventually, they will return home and realize that the cause they were defending, the righteous campaign they believed they supported, was resolved privately to protect a celebrity's reputation. Meanwhile, California Civil Code Section 47.1 will remain exactly where it belongs, protecting genuine victims who needed safeguards as Victoria Burke intended, instead of being used by entertainment figures attempting to recover expenses from their own decisions. What do you think will happen to celebrities who use victim protection laws for personal benefits? Or will this simply become another story that disappears after a few weeks and gets forgotten when another celebrity controversy arrives? I honestly do not know the answer because we have witnessed many situations where influential people face criticism temporarily and later rebuild their careers. But something about this situation feels different. Maybe it is the involvement of Queen Blake Lively. That moment when her lawyer struggled with explanations about groundbreaking laws while seemingly trying to hide that she was seeking financial recovery was one of the most revealing moments I have seen. Share your opinions in the comments and subscribe for more videos. The future will show whether this controversy creates lasting consequences or whether Hollywood eventually moves forward and restores the same opportunities she once had before this entire legal battle changed the public conversation around her.